Well, why, hello, my YouTube friends. Today I'm going to tell you guys a story from my past, and I want to preface it by saying, do not follow in my footsteps. This is an absolutely brutal, terrifying story that I hope nobody has to encounter themselves, okay? This is not me anymore, okay? This was old Adam, before I learned some very important lessons. Now, let's just jump right into this freaking story, all right? So here's the premise that was going on, guys. I had just gotten out of a crazy big argument with my ex. And this was one of those relationship ending situations. So I was hurt, panicking, angry, and I was just feeling a completely overwhelmment of emotions. So what I did was I fell back on bad things, for lack of a better word, that I shouldn't have done. I remembered that I had what I thought was one pill of MDMA in my basement. First of all, I drank a bunch of alcohol to try to soothe myself. That didn't work. You know what? I know I've got one pill of MDMA left, and I just really want to counter these negative emotions I'm feeling and just feel good. And my plan was to take it, lay down, and go to sleep on the floor in my basement. All right. So I reached for where the pill was. It was this little blue capsule. And I thought, you know what? I better be smart. I better be smart and weigh out exactly what I left in this capsule. So I weighed it out and I thought, you know what? I'm going to take a bigger than average dose this time because I really just want to zen the fuck out and just let this go and then deal with my heartbreak the next morning. Oh man. So what ended up happening was I poured the capsule into my scale, and normally you'd take like 100, 150 of M. This time I was like, no man, let's go up to like 230, 240. So I weighed out 240 from the capsule, which was basically the whole capsule. I was like, all right, this is a good dose capsule. Yeah. Oh shit, man. And I immediately mixed it in water, dropped it down my gullet, because if you do it that way, it's going to kick in faster. Meanwhile, what I didn't realize was this was not M. And I didn't actually realize what I had taken until the next day. So that's a huge part of the story that I really want to pinpoint right away, just so you know what's moving forward. But keep in mind, I thought it was M. No part of me remembered that I'd actually changed the contents of that container. In my drunken state, in my emotionally damaged, hurt state, I didn't remember. So I drank it, and immediately I started to gag. I almost spit it out right away because I was like, oh, that doesn't taste right. That tastes different. So that was my first inkling. And then I was like, all right, maybe, whatever. I just brushed it off. Oh, I guess I just forgot what it tasted like. Oh, man. So when I laid down in the basement, grabbed my blanket, shameless plug for my trip blankets, one of those mushroom ones that you can buy on our site, sexsubstance.shop, and I laid down. And not even 5 minutes goes by, and I got the alarm bells going off that something isn't right here. This isn't feeling like M. I stood up, and immediately I had felt like I lost control of my legs. It was like my legs didn't want to move. They didn't want to work. I felt like I was losing control of all motor skills. And if you know what to expect from a substance, and it gives you the complete opposite experience, and you're convinced that you took the substance you thought you took, my first gut reaction was, I'm dying. I'm dead. This is it. This is how I go. I just killed myself. Because I could barely walk. I was like, oh my God, I'm having serotonin syndrome. I'm overdosing. I immediately thought I must have weighed it out on the scale wrong. Because keep in mind, I was drunk. I was like, maybe I didn't weigh out 200. Maybe it was more like, I don't know, 800 or whatever. I thought it was like maybe a gram that I accidentally took. I was freaking out. I was like, I'm having organ failure. I'm dying. So I mustered every ounce of strength that I could, crawled my way up the stairs, 3 sets of stairs to get to the top of the house. And I turned the lights on, immediately woke up my ex, and I was like, you need to call the hospital. I'm dying. You need to call the hospital. And after this point, I blank out, completely blank out. I come to, and I'm downstairs, and I have no connection to the physical world whatsoever. I was in a place that I could only describe as absolute hell. I don't have any words to do justice how terrifying this space I was in. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know I had a body. I knew nothing. I just knew that there was like 6 figures surrounding me. The paramedics, okay? 6 people are surrounding me, and I can't make anything out. I had a slight inclining that the one person, who I'm assuming was a different gender from the rest, was supposed to care about me. But I knew inside that they didn't. But it was like I was latching on to trying to find any resemblance of care and comfort, because I didn't even know what a human was, what a body was. I knew nothing. My mind had been erased. And so like I remember reaching out and like trying to grab her and hold her hand, and then like sitting on the couch, and they're all like telling me to sit down. I don't even know what this word sit down, what does that mean? I'm standing up at the edge of the couch looking around like, oh my God, sit down, get up, look around. And I thought that I was surrounded by like 6 demons that were there to infinitely torture my soul. Straight up, that's what I thought. I thought that this is my new reality, and I'm going to be tortured, massacred, murdered. Like, I felt like I was in an endless loop of being brutally killed, and all these people were the ones who were killing me, and they were keeping me trapped in this like prison world of death and torment. It was absolute torture. Mental torture, of course. And finally, I remember when I finally started to come to, I looked at my hands and I was like, oh shit, my hands are glowing right now. I mean, they're glowing in the video right now. But I was like, oh my God, I have hands. I know what these are. And then there was one paramedic. He had his mask on. He's sitting and talking to me. And keep in mind, I don't know what a human's supposed to look like. So the masked face was fucking terrifying. And then he asked me, and then I had the inclining to like ask him, I asked him at one point, I was like, is there something under there? Could you pull that down? And he pulled it down, and then I was like, oh my God, he's a human. And he's telling me, he's trying to comfort me. He's like, all right, you're okay, man. You know, you're going to be fine. You're safe. You have a soul. And my first reaction was like, I have a soul? And I looked at my ass and I was like, how do you know I have a soul? And he just chuckled and he's looking at me. He's like, yeah, he's like, you got a soul. You're good. And then I was like, what's a soul? And I was like desperately reaching. And it was so, think about how painfully sad this is. I'm desperately reaching for the one piece of comfort that I could find in this terror situation. And they were unable to offer me any comfort or support, just anger and hatred. And it was so hard to stomach their reaction. It just amplified this absolute terror that I am aware that I put myself in. And they communicated and they wanted to take me to the hospital, and I'm starting to come to. I'm starting to realize that I can move. They needed to hold me and prop me up on them and like basically walk me out slowly. Like I was some old man that couldn't even walk because I couldn't. I lost function of my legs. And we're asking the ambulance. I was like, how do you know I'm not having organ failure? I started to come through. He was like, oh no, man, trust me, you'd be sweating a lot if you had serotonin syndrome or organ failure. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. He did he checked my blood pressure and he was like, oh, it's like 110 over 160. That's pretty high. And I looked at him, I was like, nah, I've seen worse. And at that point, that's when I knew that I was going to be okay. That's when I knew that this was a horror ride, but you know, I was going to be okay. So I was at the hospital, and actually my dad, he came and picked me up, came back home, and I just remember being filled with this sense. Once I realized that I was going to live, I was just filled with this sense of overwhelming gratitude that I hadn't created a catastrophe that ended my life. And it was like I was left with these two things. On one hand, it felt like this person I thought I was going to spend my life with rejected it, which was so painful, especially in that state. But on the other hand, I was still alive. I still had a life to live. And it was a good contrast. I tried to make the best out of a horrible situation. It was a good contrast because I felt this overwhelming gratitude for life. And I remember thinking, this is my second chance. I have a second chance now. Not to make these same stupid mistakes. Not to ever go down this stupid road again that I've treaded repeatedly because I didn't know how to handle my emotions and I was looking for things outside of myself to soothe because I didn't know how to self-soothe. And that's ultimately what I've been doing for years is my best to cope and stay and manage through some really painful personal things that I've gone through. And substances were something relatively easy for me to reach for. They were, a way to run away. And this really showed me that there's no way to run. You just got to face your shit. And I realized the next day I went to the water and I just stared out at the ocean. And that's when it clicked. And I was like, oh my God, I remember what I took. The whole time, I had no idea what I took. I was freaking out. I had no clue. And finally it clicked. And I was like, I just took 5 times the normal dose of ketamine. And I mixed it with alcohol because I was drunk. That was my wake up. I've had a million wake up calls, that was the first time in my life that I was absolutely convinced that I was going to die. No doubt whatsoever in my mind. When I couldn't use my legs, I was totally convinced that this was it. And I knew I just had to face death. And it's not how I wanted to face death. I didn't want to face death being with someone who hated me. If I'm going to die, I'd rather be around people who love me, you know? It was an absolutely horrible experience. But yeah, I found the silver lining. I made the best out of it. Sometimes life has a tendency to give you the situations that you need and not what you want for your own comfort or your own facade of comfort. It shows you exactly what you need to see, and it puts you where you need to be. And that situation, that was like a flood dose of ketamine, all right? And yeah, I guess just like when they give people ketamine therapy, I felt just so grateful and so amazing to be alive the next day. And I don't know how I managed to I essentially what ended up happening was I fought a K-hole, like a real deep K-hole, and I fought it as hard as I could. And besides that moment where I blacked out, I managed to somehow hold on. And what I haven't touched on is visually. It was visually stunning. I mean, it was terrifying, but visually it was like completely psychedelic. Even the next day, there were still like trails behind things, and lights were brighter. It was taking such a monster amount was extremely psychedelic. Extremely psychedelic. At one point when I was coming to, like, everything was made out of spiraling vortexes of energy. And keep in mind, I was in too much terror to really appreciate any of it. Now, keep in mind also, like, it would be very different if I went into this knowing that I was taking a big dose of ketamine, okay? Knowing that, like, what ketamine does is an anesthetic, like, it's going to knock you out, like, expecting to be knocked out, versus, in my mind, if I gave in and allowed myself to fall asleep, I thought I was never going to wake up again. Because keep in mind, I was like, oh my God, the M is killing me. I can't give into this. So just the very act of like having no idea what it was, and I set myself up for that. Oh man, I learned a lot. I really learned a lot. And I feel like I've had so many of these experiences, right? Where I thought that I was learning the lesson, but the thing was, there's always been this really big, this darkness that I wasn't able to face in myself, that I've been trying to use psychedelics. Even I've been in therapy for over a year now. I've seen multiple therapists. There's been this really big shadow, this childhood trauma that's never going to heal itself until I sit down and actually heal it on like an internal level. And I will keep attracting situations that aren't good for me until I actually sit down and heal this. And that's what I've taken out of all of this. I have been healing the parts of me that should have been healed a long time ago, that led me to stay too long in like a relationship that was never good for me. It let me I stayed way too long. A huge problem you guys have seen in me over the years that I've never really come to terms with has just been this piece of me that I've refused to look at and wasn't willing to heal. And you can't heal something if you're not aware that it's there. And I'm learning a lot of healthy skills now moving forward. And seeing 2 therapists a week, sometimes 3. I'm doing everything I possibly can so that this time I'm on a new path and I don't ever fall back into that way again. I've got a lot of compassion for myself and confidence. So I'm really excited for the future and what's to come. And yeah, learn from this story and don't ever do anything like I did. Don't ever. It's not worth it. Anyway, hope you guys all enjoyed this video. If you did, leave it with a big thumbs up. Like the video, leave a comment, and I will see you guys all in the next time. Let me know how you feel about these car recordings. Cheers.